Planning Committee of the Whole regular meeting on Monday, January 13th, 2019. Clerk, could I please have the roll?
Alderman Ashour.
Here.
Alderman Berry.
Here.
Alderman Bevere.
Here.
Alderman Davalos.
Here.
Alderman Goodman.
Here.
Alderman Krischel.
Here.
Alderman Widener.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here. Thank you. Will everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Now's the time we set aside for citizens' comments. I understand that we don't have any this evening, so we'll go ahead and have officials and staff's comments, beginning with the mayor. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing for this evening.
Alderman? Alderman Davalos, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I just want to make a comment about being back. I have not been around here for a few weeks, and I had a broken leg and have been rehabbing from that and had mobility issues. Have stayed in contact through other ways that we all email and phone and text. But I'll probably have another surgery, and so I just want to let everybody know I may not be able to be here for every meeting for a little while, but I will be following everything and talking to staff and welcome any emails or texts from you, from the people in Ward 3. And I just wanted to explain why occasionally this seat might be vacant. Thank you.
Alderman Goodman.
Yeah, I wanted to pass along some thanks that I've received from residents about how swiftly staff dealt with the recent small ice and snow event in the city streets and what a great condition our streets were in, and pass along thanks to the staff.
Great. Anyone else? Staff members?
Thank you. Alderman Davalos reminded me today and tonight at the meeting, the city has the ability, the council can adopt an ordinance to allow remote participation for elected officials. I don't know all the details. I'm communicating with the city attorney to see if we can move that along. It is allowed under the statute a few years back. The city hadn't really had a need, and it kind of got backburnered, so we haven't taken that action. If you should adopt that ordinance and make it part of your code, Alderman Davalos or anyone else who's traveling for business, as I recall, or is temporarily incapacitated due to illness or something else, could be present at the meeting electronically. So we'll be bringing that back as soon as the attorney has some more information about it. But just an FYI, I've moved it up on the list since we have a need to have somebody potentially participate from a remote location. So just an FYI at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I would understand that to mean that we'd be able to have any member that was missing vote and also be involved in all the discussions and motions.
I'm going off memory from a few years back. The statute allows them to be counted as present and to participate and vote, but only for certain specific, narrowly defined reasons. As I recall, it was for some kind of an illness or business travel. So if an alderman is just on vacation in Hawaii, they can't, you might all allow them to call in and listen to the meeting, but they wouldn't be able to be present and participate. But that's why I've asked the attorney to give us an update, and we'll get that detail. And if possible, I'll put it on the city council agenda for you to consider the next meeting. If not, then we'll move it on to a committee. I wanted to give everybody a heads up, though, because it's become an urgent, or more urgent matter now that we have someone that may need to take advantage of it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I'm sure I speak for the rest of the council when I say that I hope things go extremely well and that a speedy recovery is on the horizon for you and that you won't have to call in remotely and to participate, that you'll be here in living color. Thank you. All right, let's begin the business of the meeting. Consideration of the Warrenville Park District Building Permit Fee Waiver Request is our first item, and Community and Economic Development Director Ron Menser will introduce this item. Ron?
Good evening, and thank you. Last fall, the Warrenville Park District applied for a building permit for the now under construction rec center renovation project. The city ultimately issued that building permit before the beginning of this year, and the Park District requested a formal waiver of the building permit-related fees from for the project. In total, the permit costs are just under $3,200. In 2008, the City Council approved a policy that authorized staff to waive permit fees and things of that nature for other governmental jurisdictions up to $2,500. In this case, it's obviously a larger amount than what staff has the authority to waive administratively, and the policy states that the committee of the whole is to discuss and then make a recommendation on any fee waivers over the $2,500. From a staff perspective, we do not have any issues with this. It is consistent with previous fee waivers that the city has approved for large projects by other governmental jurisdictions. The most notable one that I recall is the fee waiver that was granted for Hubble School, that building permit. Staff recommends, though, if there's any recommendation to, or any action by the City Council to approve it, that it include a condition that the Park District be responsible for any hourly or outside consultant costs the city incurs to have the electrical and plumbing inspections on the project performed, which should amount to $100 or $200.
Okay, thank you, certainly.
And
the city-
Executive Director Ryan Bowles here from the Park District to address any questions you might have about their project or their request.
Okay, thank you for coming, Director Reinbold. Appreciate it. And are there any questions from the council? Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, I just wondered if Tim would tell us a little bit about the project.
You need to, I'm sorry,
People
need to
watching
use
at
the
home need to hear you.
microphone. in a couple weeks, though, you can phone in.
Yes, so what we're planning on, what we're doing over there currently is we have a number of entrances and exits to the building. So we're narrowing that down because of the accessibility that we have in a number of different areas. So in the front of the building along Warren Avenue, there'll be a new main entrance that will be from that side of the street as opposed to the one from the rear end of the street. There'll be some ADA accessibility issues that are going to be addressed during this. But the biggest part of this process is what we're going to be doing is increasing the footprint of the fitness center by about 33%. It'll all be internal, but we'll be adding some more free weight areas and some areas that some of our residents and our members have been requesting for a long time. So we're looking forward to getting it going. It's probably about a third of the way through right now. A lot of dust and a lot of work going on in the building, but hopefully within the next 6 weeks we'll be completed.
Great.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? If not, Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve the Warrenville Park District's November 19th, 2019 permit fee waiver request with the conditions laid forth in the memo from Director Menser.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you for your attendance this evening, Director.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And we'll move along to the next item on the agenda, which is consideration of plan to retire their Acorn Van Program. Assistant City Administrator Christina White will introduce this topic.
Thank you.
Christina?
On December 2nd, the City Council directed staff to come up with a plan to end the Acorn Van program. So included in the backup of the materials tonight is basically a plan with a variety of different topics included. So without going through every specific detail, I do want to point out a few things here. We are proposing that the program end on April 10th, 2020, which is a little bit earlier than the complete end of the fiscal year, which is, as you know, is April 30th. That is because, one, the van lease actually expires on April 20th the coming year, and we would need to let the van lease company know that we are no longer going to pursue extending the lease or renewing the lease, and also have some time to clean the van and turn it over to them before that lease expires. So we are proposing the end date to be April 10th. We are proposing the last sale date of the ride cards would be March 27th. Again, because those get purchased at blocks of 30. So you get, $30, 10 ride cards, 10 rides per card, which is $30. I'm mixing my numbers here. So the van lease notice would have to go out by February 20th. We would automatically register all of the current Acorn Van riders for the Ride DuPage program, so staff would handle doing that. We may need to communicate with those riders to get information that we may not have up to date in order to do so, but we would handle doing all those registrations in advance of the cutover date so that they are all registered and ready to go. We are also proposing a ride card buyback program for anyone that has remaining cards for the Acorn van, so they would get their money back for anything that they've purchased up through essentially the end of May. In addition to that, and one thing I wanted to point out about the buyback cards, we would not do cash refunds. That would be via a check. So they would come in with a form and their cards that are with the unused rides, they would turn that into staff. Staff would approve it, make sure it's valid, and issue a reimbursement check within a 60-day period to them, either mailed or they can make arrangements to come pick it up. Additionally, once or if the City Council approves the plan to terminate the program, we would issue a series of communications that would include a letter directly mailed to each of the current van participants, letting them know what's going on. We would publish that information in the hometown happenings in both February and March, as well as on Facebook. And then obviously post that information on the city website under our transportation page to let everyone know what's going on with the program, where they can get information about Ride DuPage, how to register if they have questions, where to go. And then ultimately, we have 2 van drivers that are currently employed as part of the Acorn Van program. Staff is recommending a separation agreement with those 2 van drivers and a severance payment of $1,000 each. The separation agreement will be brought forward at a future committee meeting to be reviewed and approved separately as required, but felt it was important to mention it tonight as part of this discussion. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
I have a couple of questions. You'd said $1,000 to each driver, and the budgetary impact seems to have that maybe backwards. The buyback costs for the rider cards versus the severance. I mean, it's a pretty similar number, both in the neighborhood of about 2,000. I would think we would have some idea based on sales of the 10 ride cards, how many people might have a stockpile of unused cards.
Okay, so the numbers are correct. The buyback costs are estimated based on the number of rider cards we've sold year to date. Obviously, that assumes that they're all getting sold back. It's probably a very high number, but staff felt it was important to be more conservative than less conservative. So we assumed a full buyback, which again is probably not likely. The $2,153 in severance, that number came from Finance Director Dahlstrom because there are some taxes that are obviously paid when we pay employees as part of their paychecks. So that number includes what he's estimating to be taxes for FICA and all of the other employer-related costs that go along with that.
Okay. Secondly, what about, in terms of the communication, what about an announcement of the new program on the city's digital sign? I do often find when I talk to residents that they haven't heard of the Acorn Van program, and I know we've been publicizing that a little bit for many years, so more people know about that than will know about Ride DuPage, since we've just started talking about it. So maybe a new blitz of advertising to try and let people know that this is available to them and get that program kicked off.
Absolutely, it's not a problem.
And then thirdly, about the age difference between 60 and 65. I know that there had been some discussions I've certainly had with other aldermen about whether we want to create our own standard for this new Ride DuPage program at 60 or at 65. And since our current program allows people to sign up at age 60, then perhaps there are other aldermen who would be interested in leaving that age requirement the same for the new program. And I just wondered what other aldermen thought about that.
Other aldermen? Alderman Krishel?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that as well. Not only for the transition period, but for the rest of the going forward. Leave it as it is today, if we could do that.
Alderman Davalos?
Yeah, I'm just understanding, I know we're grandfathering in the people that are currently able to ride, but how is that going to really work with Ride DuPage when they have their regulations for other communities? And yet, can our community then just come in and say, we want to change those qualifying ages? I don't know how that would work.
Yes, we can. So we handle all of the registrations that come in, so the city does have some authority to decide how it wants to handle that. So if we want to make the age 60, that's okay, because we would be the ones submitting the registration forms to Ride DuPage with our approval, for lack of a better word. There's not really an approval, but by us sending it to them, it's indicating that we're approving those folks to be on the program.
Thank you.
There will be a point person from staff on this to help any individual that has any questions, concerns, or needs to learn the new system, correct?
Yes, so currently Diana Herrera in the finance department is doing all the registration acceptance of the forms and can answer questions. I am also obviously involved and can answer questions. And Kristen Youngmeyer, the management analyst at Public Works, will also act as a contact and assist with managing the program and attending the sponsor meetings and all of that. So she'll be well informed about what's going on with the program as well.
Will their numbers or names be listed on any of the future information that goes out? Because I think Warrenville is really noted for that specific point person contact that staff delivers. And I just think that, as we roll this over into a new program, it would be beneficial to carry out that thing that we're so noted for with our customer service and, our approach to the people.
Absolutely. I don't recall specifically right now if anyone is listed as the main contact on the senior transportation page, but I could double check on the website, and if not, we can certainly add contact information.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion. Anyone? Do you have a comment?
Just a follow-up, there was a question about keeping the age at 60, so I would ask that that be incorporated into the motion as well, if that is the direction of the council, so that's clear.
Okay. Hopefully the motioner will do that. Alderman Berry.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the city council accept the plan to retire the Acorn Van program effective April 10th, 2020, and allow riders into the Ride DuPage program starting at the age of 60.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Ms. White. And our next item on the agenda is consideration of amendments to Section 2, Health and Safety of the Personnel Manager. And again, Assistant City Administrator Christina White will tell us about this agenda item.
Thank you. On January 1st, the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act became effective. As a result, we asked the labor attorney to take a look at our policies related to that in Section 2 of the Personnel Manual. So included in the agenda backup are some revisions to Sections 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4 of our policies, and specifically that's the tobacco-free workplace, drug and alcohol-free workplace, alcohol substance abuse rehabilitation, and employee alcohol and drug testing policies. There's also a brief summary before the policies that talks about what changes were made to each of those sections. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from any of the aldermen? Seeing none. Alderman Berry?
Well, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the city council approve the amendments to Section 2 of the City of Warrenville Personnel Manual effective immediately.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you again, Ms. White. And item number 4 is to review and authorize the execution of 2020 participation grant acceptance form. And do we have a individual who's going to present
Yeah,
this from staff?
Senior Planner Natalia Domovsova has been coordinating this effort, but unfortunately, she had a illness in the family that she needed to attend to this evening. So I'm going to pinch hit on this one, but it's pretty straightforward, and I am familiar with the issue. So you may recall that last fall, the City Council authorized staff to coordinate the establishment and then the ongoing conduct of a complete count committee in the city of Warrenville. The complete count committee's efforts would be designed to improve the outreach, 2020 census outreach to what the census count or has identified as hard to count groups. And these are generally people that might be less inclined to register with the census or may not be English-speaking folks, and they may not respond well to just normal communication. So that committee is in place, and the city's had a couple meetings with that committee and established a work program that will allow the stakeholders that are on that committee to begin outreach efforts in the very near future in the community. Kind of concurrently with that, staff applied for a census participation grant last fall through the Illinois Department of Human Services and was successful in receiving that grant award. It will be administered by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. It's essentially a reimbursement grant, and it will help offset some of the costs the city incurs as it outreaches to the city and the complete count committee outreach to the hard-to-count elements of the community. In the agenda backup, we included a copy of the terms and conditions that are associated with the grant, the work program that the city expects to implement in reaching out to those hard-to-count folks, and the budget for implementing that effort. At this point in time, the City Council needs to accept the grant and authorize staff to execute the grant acceptance agreement that's been included in the agenda packet backup, and that is something that staff is recommending that the council do.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Before I address the actual grant itself, I wanted to raise an issue that was just brought to my attention. Alderman Berry is the City Council representative on the Complete Count Committee, and Alderman Davalos is her backup, but apparently the meetings are held during the day when Alderman Berry is at work and cannot attend, and Alderman Davalos has been having some health issues. So I've offered to step in as a backup to the backup. So I would like to make a motion to designate Alderman Goodman as a backup for Alderman Berry and Davalos to the Census Complete Count Committee.
Second.
Thank you for stepping up. Any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And before we carry on to the next item, the mayor wants to make an announcement regarding this topic. Mayor? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we need to have a vote on the rest of the package. Alderman Goodman?
Yes, I will also make a motion to recommend that the City Council accept the Census 2020 participation grant in the amount of $3,650 and authorize staff to execute the grant acceptance form.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And thank you for standing in, Director Menser. And at this time, I will turn it again over to the mayor.
A couple of quick things while we're on the census subject. The 2020 census will actually begin on April 1st, and every household in the community will receive an invitation in the mail with a code to respond to the census questions. And residents will have an option to respond either by U.S. mail or making a phone call or responding online. But of course, your response is very important to the community, our representation, and some money that we receive from the federal government depends on an accurate census count. So I would really encourage everyone to participate. If you're looking for part-time work, the U.S. Census is hiring temporary employees at a generous wage of $29.50 an hour. So if you're looking again for something to do part-time, there will be a hiring event at the Warrenville Library to give you an idea of how to get involved with this, and that will be on Wednesday, January 22nd at 1 p.m. To 6 p.m. You can come in, so there's a range of time there. You don't have to be there at a certain time. So again, if you're interested in part-time work with the census count, the Warrenville Library has an event to help you get involved with that on January 22nd. That's a Wednesday between 1 and 6 p.m. at the library. Thank you.
Thank you for the additional details, Mayor. The next item we have this evening is for informational purposes, and it's to receive the update on the city's due diligence activity on former Citgo gas station property at 28 West, 244 Warrenville Road. Community and Economic Development Director Menser will tell us about this.
Okay, you may recall that last October, the City Council approved a contract that could lead to the city's purchase and acquisition of the former Citgo gas station at the corner of Batavia and Warrenville Road. The structure of the contract allowed the city through the end of January to perform whatever due diligence activities on the property that it felt was necessary and appropriate to make an informed decision on whether or not to actually consummate the purchase and acquisition of this property. And I can report to you that we have been actively performing all those due diligence activities, and I just wanted to give you a synopsis of the most important activities that have been completed to date. Where we're at, some of the initial findings that have surfaced through that work, and what we're going to plan on doing going forward here and presenting to the council, probably most likely in early February. So we completed a new Phase 1 environmental site assessment on the property. Nothing new was identified, no new concerns or issues through that assessment. We performed an extensive asbestos and regulated material investigation and survey on the property, and that was really focused on the building improvements on the property, structural building improvements, to identify if there was any asbestos-containing materials or other hazardous or regulated materials such as PCB containing light ballast that would have to be removed and disposed of in a special manner. And in fact, that analysis did confirm the existence of asbestos-related materials and other regulated materials that would have to be disposed of in a special manner. So we're in the process of talking with contractors to identify what the costs associated with taking care of those materials and demoing the site improvements would be going forward, so we can share that at a future meeting with the City Council. Most importantly, we conducted a variety of additional Phase 2 site investigation activities on the property. It included taking a number of additional soil samples, both in terms of geographic area. We covered some new areas on the property, but we also went deeper than some of the previous samples that had been performed on the property. Those samples were analyzed, and there was quite a bit of modeling that was done related to the information that was gathered with the groundwater. Key takeaways from those samples is that there is still underground storage tank related contamination on the property that needs to be taken care of and dealt with. We have a better idea of the scope of contamination and what it's going to take to deal with that contamination so that the property could be reused in a manner that would be more consistent with the city's long-term plans and vision for the property. We've also, through that work, have confirmed that there is heavy metal related contamination both in the soils on the property and in the groundwater on the property. When I say contamination, there's levels of heavy metal that are above what the IEPA has established as cleanup thresholds, or remediation thresholds. In some cases, depending on what you're going to do on the property, you could leave it there and cover it up. So we do have a better understanding of the scope and scale, you might say, of that heavy metal contamination. And we're actively working with the consultant and contractors to convert all that information, not only that information, but information that we've historically assembled for that property, to develop more detailed and concise cost estimate information of all of the work that's going to need to occur on the property if the city was to take ownership of it and want to put it in a condition that would accommodate the private redevelopment of the perimeter of the property outside the floodplain along the street frontages, and then some type of public open space in the floodplain portion of the property. So our goal is to summarize all the information that I just talked about and provide that to the city council along with the cost estimate information and a recommendation how to proceed at the first committee meeting in February.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, okay. Thank you very much for the report. We'll move on to the next item for consideration of requests, the city enforcement of fire lane parking restrictions and Vanguard apartment project. And again, Director Menser will provide us with the information we need for this topic. Ron?
Okay, so the Vanguard apartment project is the apartment project that's going to happen in the vacant parking lot area located just to the west of the Regal Theater down in Cantera, Sub-Area G, on the north side of Deal Road. As part of the city and fire district review of that development project, the fire district requested that the city have the right to enforce no parking fire lane restrictions around that proposed project. It is private property, so the city attorneys advised that the best way to accommodate that request and implement city enforcement is to have the owner of the property submit a formal written request that the city come on their property and enforce those types of regulations, and then the city council adopting an ordinance that would memorialize the city's commitment to do so. This is the same process that we followed last year to memorialize the city's commitment to enforce those same type of regulations in both the Lexington Trace and the Everton projects. As such, we're recommending that the city council authorize staff and the attorney to prepare that ordinance and then approve that ordinance at an upcoming city council meeting.
Thank you for the details. Any questions or comments? Okay, anyone care to make a motion approving this item? Alderman Goodman?
Just a quick question. There's $5,000 estimated in fees to the state. Then this is about $55,400, and the total estimate is $60,400. Is that correct?
Okay, so that's I think that's the, is that the next? Oh, maybe I jumped ahead.
Looking at 7, we're on 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm looking at the
Yeah,
wrong
no,
one.
I think that's the next item.
Sorry. I will ask that question in a minute again then. Never mind. I make a motion to recommend that the city council approve an ordinance documenting the city's intent to enforce no parking fire lane restrictions on private driveway areas within the Vanguard apartment project.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is consideration of updated Civic Center redevelopment site number 1, off-site environmental investigation results, remediation recommendations, and remediation proposal. Director Menser?
Back in 2004, the city was the owner of Civic Center redevelopment site number 1, and that year was the year that we were implementing the what I call the dig and haul remediation activities on the property. We're digging out all of the petroleum contaminated soils on both the city's redevelopment site and the adjacent properties where some of the remediation had migrated to underground, adjacent residential private properties. One of those properties has a detached garage on it that's located relatively close to the southern boundary of Civic Center Redevelopment Site Number 1. And as our contractor, V3, was coordinating that work, it was determined that some of the contamination had migrated so close or even underneath the very corner of the off-site garage that they couldn't continue just to dig out that material without putting at risk the structural integrity of the garage. So they stopped removing the material versus via digging it out, and placed some chemical material right at the contamination line in the soil, with the hope that that would bioremediate the remaining contamination over a period of time. This past fall, we went out, or it might have been the summer, we went out and had our consultant take some current sampling to verify if the material was still at levels that would require some type of more active remediation. And unfortunately, those samples did confirm that the contamination is still at an elevated level and needs to be actively remediated. We've had a number of conversations and discussions with the property owner about how best to make that happen and what's the most feasible, least intrusive, and overall what will be the most cost-effective manner to deal with that. We've communicated with the environmental consulting firm that helped coordinate and implement the 2014 work, and ultimately determined that the most appropriate way, cost-effective, least intrusive way to deal with that remaining contamination would be to implement what's called a steam injection remediation process. So they basically take water out of the city's water system and then heat it to the point where it creates steam, and then they inject the steam into the ground, into the area where the contamination is, and then they use that steam to suck out the contamination in the water that is attached to the steam in some form or another. The total cost of the work is estimated to be, not estimated, the lump sum cost of the work, including both the physical remediation work and the consulting work that goes along with it, is $55,400. We were anticipating that we would incur some of these costs when we prepared this year's budget, the fiscal 2020 budget, and we budgeted $50,000 in the budget for this work. It is, the cost estimate is just slightly higher than what we budgeted, but there are other items in that account in the TIF budget that are under budget, so there's ample funds to pay for this work to be performed. So it's $55,400 for the consulting and remediation work necessary to deal with this, and then there will be an additional $5,000 estimated cost for the state of Illinois to review the sampling results and provide a 4Y letter, which is the letter that the state documents that we've dealt with that offsite issue to proper remediation standards, and it's closed. So staff is recommending that the City Council waive competitive bidding and approve the revised January 3rd, 2020 professional services proposal from V3 Companies.
Thank you. Questions? Alderman Berry.
Okay, this is gonna sound kind of bizarre, but what's the cost of taking down the garage, taking out the stuff and building a new garage?
The owner wasn't real receptive to that, and we don't really have the authority to do that without his approval,
Right.
but we did internally identify some general costs to take down the garage, rebuild the garage, and then still do a dig and haul remediation, and it would probably end up being collectively more expensive than doing what we're proposing. So that's why we feel this is the most cost-efficient method and the least intrusive, which is something that the property owner is interested in.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve a resolution waiving competitive bidding and approving a contract with V3 Companies for environmental remediation services for the Civic Center redevelopment site number 1 off-site environmental remediation project in an amount of $55,400.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is to review and file the Community Development Department's fiscal year 2020 work program update. If there's no comments or questions regarding that matter, then we will do as indicated and review and file that report. I see no one raising their hand or asking questions, so we'll move on to item number 9, to review and file the Economic Development Activity Report. Again, if there's any questions or comments, seeing none, we'll move up. Mayor, go ahead.
Just wanted to comment on the amount of economic activity going on in the community, and again, to compliment the Economic Development Director and how he handles all of these things and still gets his regular job done, because there is just a lot going on in the community. A lot of it's very complex. A lot of it is going to transform certain parts of the community, and I think in a positive way because of your attention to the details. So thank you, Ron, and again, 3 pages of stuff going on in the town is pretty impressive for our little town.
I would be remiss, it's not just Ron,
It's
it's the
your
entire Community Development Department. The people in the department are truly dedicated public servants. They care about providing great service for the community, and they care about the future of the community.
Absolutely. So pass along our compliments and our
Will.
thanks
Thank you.
to your whole department.
Thank you very much.
Well said. Item number 10 is to review and file the commercial space vacancy report. Again, this is for your information, if anyone has questions. If not, we'll review and file that. And our last item on this evening's agenda is to review and file the bi-monthly code enforcement activity report. And if there's no questions or comments, we do have one. The mayor is stepping up once more. Mayor.
Before you adjourn, I have another announcement. We still have 2 full-time positions open at the city that we're looking for qualified people for. The first one is a fleet management technician in the Public Works Department. And the second one is an accounting clerk number 2 at the Accounts Payable in the Finance Department. Anybody who would be qualified for those positions and interested, we would ask to submit a application and resume to Alma Morgan. And her email address is amorgan, all lowercase, one word, @warrenville.il.us. Any questions or anything, you can always just call City Hall and they can direct you to Alma. But those 2 positions remain open. We're looking for qualified people. Again, fleet management technician in the Public Works Department and accounting clerk 2, accounts payable in the Finance Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, we have one more item of business. Alderman Goodman.
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you and good evening.